What do you think of when you think of some of the most underrated rivalries in college sports? Maybe you think about Farmageddon, the game between K-State and Iowa State, or maybe you think about the historical games like USC and Notre Dame, or in-state rivalries like Penn State and Pittsburgh. But there are some rivalries that have been dormant and haven't been played for a little bit that are honestly some of the most fun out there. Today, I'll be talking about one of those rivalries. That is the arch rivalry between the Missouri Tigers and the Illinois Fighting Illini, which is coming back as soon as 2026 with a game in Champaign and will be played every year from 2026 to 2029, and then again in 2032 and 2035, as Mizzou is trying to get more of their historical rivals scheduled. Today, we're going to be talking about just that. We're going to talk about the history of the arch rival, some of the greatest moments from that rivalry, and why it is such an underrated event. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the most underrated rivalry in football, the arch rivalry. Lots of rivalry games are started because of their geographical locations between two campuses, and the arch rivalry really existed because of that. It's pretty much the epitome of that. Illinois and Mizzou are pretty close to each other in terms of large college campuses, with Champaign and Columbia only being 270 miles and 4.5 hours apart. Culturally, the two universities are pretty similar, as they're in the same region and have dual claims over the same city, St. Louis. And that's really what the main reason for the rivalry is, in fact. St. Louis gets a lot of alumni from both Illinois and Mizzou, so they each see each other a lot. They first started the game in 1896 as just a normal football game, since the two campuses were so close to St. Louis, where the game was held, and it was easy to schedule a game between the two. Illinois won 10-0, and they wouldn't play again until 1913, where Illinois won again 24-7, this time on their campus. But after that, Missouri started to get better at football, and Illinois started to get worse. Mizzou joined the Big Six Conference in 1928, which then became the Big Seven with the addition of Colorado in 1947. Illinois had always been a member of the Big Ten Conference, and they didn't play each other again until 1949, but by that point, the Big Ten and Big Seven were both major football conferences. Missouri would win this game 27-20 at Illinois, and the game would take another break until 1966, when Mizzou would win 21-14, and then again in 1968, when Mizzou would win 44-0. The Tigers' winning streak would continue in 1969, this time in St. Louis again, when they'd win 37-6 and would enter the top 5 nationally. By this point, though, the game was starting to take on a different form. While football was the most prominent sport between the two schools, basketball was starting to get more competitive due to both schools recruiting players from the St. Louis region. The basketball version of this game was given the name the Bragging Rights game, and it became a yearly rivalry game played between the Tigers and the Illini, sometimes taking place at a neutral court in St. Louis. The basketball programs have kept up on that game every year since 1976, and a large part of that basketball rivalry started bleeding over onto the football game as well. As a side note, many of you guys know I'm a die-hard Mizzou fan, and I also love basketball, and the Bragging Rights game always happens right before Christmas, and it's always a treat to watch, and those games have been extremely entertaining. There have been some crazy buzzer beaters, some crazy performances, and that game is always a lot of fun to watch. Missouri and Illinois on the football side started a 6-game series from 1975 to 1980, and Missouri would win 30-20 in 1975 and increase their winning streak to 5 straight games. But in 1976, Illinois won their first game in the series since 1913, in the first game played in Columbia, 31-16. It's kind of weird that a rivalry game wasn't played in one of the school's stadium until the 8th game, but I guess that wasn't a priority early on. Illinois won the next year in Champaign 11-7, but Mizzou then won at home the next year in 1978, 45-3. They'd win again in 1979 and then again in 1980. These are some of the best years for Missouri football in the 70s and 80s, with them being ranked in most of their matchups, while Illinois struggled to put together a decently successful football team during that exact same time frame. A lot of the times that kills rivalries when one school is so dominant over the other, but the arch rivalry developed into a sort of friendly rivalry on the football field, while the basketball version kept up the heat. It became sort of a fun game to play, but not important enough that it had to be played every season. It then took a 2-year break until 1983, when Missouri won in Columbia once again. The next year, Illinois then won at home, and the game took another break until 1991, when it was decided to have another 4-game series between the two schools played on their campuses, and each team won at home, trading wins back and forth. The 1993 and 1994 games were blowouts though, with Missouri dominating in both of those games, with Missouri dominating 31-3 in 93, and then Illinois blanking Mizzou 42-0 in 94. That leads us into the modern era of the rivalry in the 2000s. It was decided again that the two teams would play a 2-game series in 2002 and 2003, and then a 4-game series from 2007 to 2010. But instead of being played on those campuses, the game would be played at a neutral site in St. Louis, and the name Arch Rivalry would become official, named after the St. Louis Arch. Missouri has won every single game since then, but every one of those games has been close. Brad Smith was a Heisman candidate for Mizzou in 2002 and 2003, and he put up 152 passing yards and 138 rushing yards in the 2002 game, and then had 2 touchdowns in the 2003 version of the game. Weirdly enough, in 2003, Illinois outgained Mizzou 411 to 223, but Mizzou won 22 to 15. 2007 featured 2 teams that had gone on to have crazy years in 2007, as Mizzou ended up playing KU at Arrowhead in a game that would decide who played in the Big 12 championship, and they almost played in the national championship. Illinois, on the other hand, went 9-4, upset number 1 Ohio State, and went to the Rose Bowl. It featured big-time players like Juice Williams for Illinois and both Chase Daniel and Jeremy Maclin for Mizzou. The Tigers won 40-34, and it has been a good game regardless of the team's performance the rest of the season, which is a good thing for the rivalry game in general. Take the 2008 game, for example. Missouri won 52-42. Mizzou entered that game ranked number 6 in the country and would finish at 10-4 and ranked number 19. Illinois, on the other hand, finished 2008 at 5-7 and wasn't even in the same stratosphere as the Tigers were, but the game was competitive anyways, and it always tended to feature some really good players as well. In 2009, Blaine Gabbert threw for 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards to help Mizzou blow out the Illini, and the next season it was much more competitive as Michael Longshore and Heisman candidate Nathan Scheelhaus combined for 188 yards in that game. Mizzou still won 23-13 because of a touchdown pass to tight end Michael Agnew, who became a superstar at the tight end position. It was still a very entertaining game for people to go to, and it always lived up to the hype. But Missouri had wanted to lead the Big 12 since the 90s, and the conference they really wanted to go to most was the Big 10, where Illinois was. If that had happened, Illinois and Mizzou would have played every year in a protected rivalry game. What happened instead killed the game for a few years. Teams started leaving the Big 12 all at once, with Colorado announcing they would join the Pac-12 in 2011, and Nebraska doing the same thing for the Big 10. There were also thoughts that Oklahoma and Texas would leave for the Pac-12 and bring their rivals Oklahoma State and Texas Tech with them, and that Texas A&M would leave for the SEC. That would have totally collapsed the Big 12, and it would have left Baylor, KU, K-State, Iowa State, and Missouri in a danger of being relegated to the Big East. Missouri took matters into its own hands and ended up leaving the Big 12, hoping they'd be able to reunite with Nebraska in the Big 10 as the conference's 13th member and potentially bring Kansas with them. But the Big 10 wasn't really all that interested in Mizzou and definitely wasn't interested in adding Kansas, so Missouri had to scramble to find a landing spot. When Texas A&M announced their move to the SEC, Mizzou then announced they'd become a 14th member a couple of months later. But since they were planning on joining the Big 10, they hadn't really scheduled any future games against Illinois, and the schedules in the SEC made it hard for them to schedule rivals out of conference. They really only just now started to find ways to schedule games against their old conference rivals, as they had a 2-game series with Kansas State in 2022 and 2023, and some future games against Colorado, and some games against Kansas in the border war coming up in the next few seasons. Since schedules need to be filled out years in advance, they scheduled a series with each other in 2017 to bring back the Arch Rivalry for 2026 for a 4-game series. Instead of going back to St. Louis, though, the games will be played at each team's home stadium. Illinois' AD said, quote, "The opportunity to compete against an opponent from the SEC and play a geographic rival like Mizzou will be exciting for our players, coaches, and fans." Missouri's AD said, quote, "This is another opportunity to renew a great football rivalry that we believe Tiger fans everywhere will be excited about. And honestly, I think the games will be good because both programs are getting back to levels they haven't been at in a while. Obviously, some of you know now that I'm a Mizzou fan, and these last few years, they've been pretty solid. They had their moments early on in the SEC in 2013 and 14, had a couple of moments under Drew Lock, and then ultimately finally found their stride again last season, as they were pretty mediocre in the first 3 years under Drinkwitz, but broke out last season, and currently they are playoff contenders in 2024. They are currently 32-21 under Coach Drinkwitz, but they won 11-2 last season and won the Cotton Bowl over Ohio State, and this season they are 4-0 and ranked number 8 in the country. So it really does feel like they've figured it out and are becoming one of the toughest teams in the SEC. And even though Illinois has been pretty bad since Ron Zook left in 2012, they too are starting to turn a corner under Brett Bielema. Since Bielema took over in 2021, the Illini have gone 5-7, 8-5, and 5-7 again, but so far this season, they're 4-1 and ranked in the top 25 for the first time in a long time, with their only loss coming to Penn State, who might be one of the best teams, if not the best team in the Big Ten. And if both of these teams keep up their trajectory, the Arch Rivalry might become one of the best games of the entire college football season again. Missouri leads the all-time series 17-7, but there could definitely be some entertaining games in the future. I'm really excited for this, and I'll probably try to personally attend, and I have a lot of nostalgia. Some of the first games I ever remember watching as a human being on this earth were those Arch Rivalry matchups, and I remember getting super excited. Guys like Denario Alexander, Blaine Gabbert, Chase Daniel, and Jeremy Macklin all were so much fun to watch, and I remember Nathan Shielhouse and Juice Williams because of those moments. The Braggin' Rights basketball game is also a treat to watch each and every December, and really gets me in the mood for Christmas, and is always a big game before conference play. But what do you guys think? If you're an Illinois or Mizzou fan, what do you think of the Braggin' Rights and the Arch Rivalry game, and what is another underrated rivalry matchup I could take a look at next? I don't typically do videos like this, but I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm open to doing more concepts like this. But if you enjoyed it, I need to know by leaving a like, leave a comment, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, and I hope to see you guys again soon. But until next time, peace.